There's a place in America called Arlington Cemetery. Some people call it hallowed ground, and I think actually all people call it that, except one guy. His name is Donald J. Trump. He doesn't think it's hallowed ground. You see, he was warned last week that, hey, you're not allowed to take photographs in this freaking cemetery. It's called Lot 60. It's where people from Afghanistan and Iraq, basically wars that have living memory, people who are still alive, know the people in the ground. You're not allowed to take pictures there. And it makes perfect sense, right? Because if you take a picture and you're using those photographs to, I don't know, sell something or run a campaign or do any of those things, you are desecrating those graves. Those people and their families have rights. This is federal law. This isn't some like little policy, okay? This is federal law. They were warned. Arlington National Cemetery is the resting place for more than 400,000 service members, veterans, and their families. Cemetery officials said in a statement that an incident had occurred and a report had been filed, but it did not address details of what had happened. They declined to share the report, but don't worry, everyone else is sharing. It looks like they warned them not to film, and then they came in with a camera crew, and someone who works there said, hey, you're not allowed to do that, and they pushed that person because, people mean nothing. We need our props. We need some cemetery headstones. Now, why were they there? Because he wants to make a joke on Kamala Harris, saying that she's disgraceful, folks. She's disgraceful. Because there were 13 service members who gave their lives in the retreat, the withdrawal, whatever you want to call it, from Afghanistan. Now, we all knew that one day this was coming. We spent 20 years spilling American blood in that desert. And you know what? What do we have to show for it? Not much. You could blame George W. Bush for that if you'd like. I don't know who's really to blame, but you could blame Osama bin Laden. You could blame Barack Obama for not withdrawing when he said he would. You could blame Trump for not withdrawing when he said he would. But at the end of the day, there was a withdrawal. 13 people died. Blame whoever you'd like. Be my guest. I endorse nobody. I have no one. I got no one to love in this whole thing. But you know who I do love are the people in the ground. You know why? Because I'm American. I still think that these things are important. I still care that these people gave their lives for my way of life. Like, you could say what you want. People don't die for flags and all war is wrong. I totally agree with that. But there are people in the ground right now, darling. And those people deserve respect. Unless, of course, you're Donald Trump, then you're allowed to do anything. Federal law prohibits political campaign or election related activities within Army national military cemeteries to include photographers, content creators, or any other persons attending for purposes or in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign, the cemetery officials said. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced the widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. We can confirm there was an incident and that a report was filed. Federal law. This isn't just a little policy at a hotel or something that Donald Trump can get away with. He wanted to make a joke about the people who died that day and use those people in order to score political points, to make political hay. And that's the whole reason he was there. Look at what these people, these 13 lives of these losers, because that's what he calls service people losers. He called John McCain a loser. John McCain was in a POW camp. He said he prefers his heroes not to get captured. He does it over and over and over again. This is what Trump team said. For a despicable individual to physically prevent President Trump's team from accompanying him to this solemn event is a disgrace and does not deserve to represent the hallowed grounds of Arlington National Cemetery, he said in a written statement, misspelling the word hallowed. Doesn't know how to spell hallowed, but this is hallowed ground. Whoever this individual is spreading these lies are dishonoring the men and women of our armed forces. You know who disgraced our armed forces? Donald Trump. It's disgusting. I can't even believe that this is happening. I keep on thinking that the man has sunk so low that there's no place left to go. And yet here we are. Here we are. Of course, the people who are being used are saying that they comported themselves with the utmost respect. And I'm sure they did, except for when they pushed around the military service personnel who were working there. This is what we've come to expect from Donald Trump and his team on CNN. Donald Trump is a person who wants to make everything about Donald Trump. He also somebody who has a history of demeaning and degrading military service members, those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. It's it's sad but all too expected that Donald Trump would desecrate the hallowed ground and put campaign politics ahead of honoring our hero. His behavior and that of his campaign is abhorrent and shameful. Holy shit. They asked Kamala and she says it's all a bit sad, isn't it? It's all a bit sad. Holy crap. Hollowed, yeah, hollowed, hollowed ground. Yeah, they dug it, they dug a bunch of graves, so it must be hollowed ground. Hollowed ground. Yeah, give the chance a kid, Dean. The guy's like, ugh. He's a parody of himself at this point. They asked Shady JD Vance. They asked him, "What do you think? What do you think, Shady JD?" Trump's running mate, JD Vance, was asked about the incident Wednesday at a campaign event in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's what you want when you're in a battleground state. Excuse me, sir. I heard that your boss is pissing on the graves of soldiers now. Is that what's happening? JD Vance says, apparently somebody apparently somebody at Arlington Cemetery, some staff member, had a little disagreement with somebody. And the media has turned this into a national news story. Yeah, it's a national news story, buddy. You're breaking federal law. Your boss broke federal law. He's tried to instead focus on the U.S. withdrawal of Afghanistan. Of course, because that's why they were there. Let's stick to the talking points. That's why we're at the Arlington Cemetery in the first place, is to make political hay about a tragedy, was a withdrawal. I mean, this wasn't Dunkirk. You know what I mean? There have been, when you're withdrawing troops, it's not a good thing. It's not a good day. You know, this isn't Hanoi, the last helicopter out of Hanoi. This isn't um this isn't Dunkirk. This is a military withdrawal that had some problems because a suicide bomber killed 13 people at an airport. A suicide bomber. And these people were victims of that because they were there trying to orchestrate the chaotic withdrawal. Because you know what, as orderly as you try to make a withdrawal from a nation that you have well you've occupied, it's not going to look good. It's not going to look good, especially when there's suicide bombers. I mean, even Dunkirk and Hanoi, they didn't have those things going on, you know. They have suicide bombers. But I'm not giving anybody any breaks. War is bad. We shouldn't have been in Afghanistan. And when we were coming out, it was, I don't know what people expected. People will call it botched. People will call it disgraceful. But honestly, I feel like this is what happens. I don't know why people were surprised by it. But um, instead, he tried to focus on Afghanistan, calling Harris disgraceful for not firing anyone for the deaths of service members in the terror attack. She can go to hell, said Vance. Go to hell? I'm pretty sure that the people who desecrate the graves of soldiers are the ones that go to hell. I'm pretty sure that I think that's in the Bible somewhere. It's been a while since I've read it, but I think that's in the Bible somewhere. The Pentagon investigation into the deadly attack concluded that the suicide bomber acted alone and that the deaths of more than 170 Afghans and 13 U.S. service members were not preventable. But critics have slammed the Biden Biden administration for the catastrophic evacuation, saying it should have started earlier than it did. It should have started earlier than it did. Yeah, 20 years ago, it should have started. It should have started 20 years ago. But I don't know if you remember, but we wouldn't get out. I don't know if you remember, but Donald Rumsfeld and George W. Bush called this the forever war, the unending struggle, our jihad. This was the war that would never end, the war on terror that we were never getting out of Afghanistan. 20 years later, we got out of Afghanistan. The Russians tried to warn us. We all tried to say it. I remember I was like, wow, what are we doing? I mean, I remember when I first became an activist, I was marching not really about Afghanistan, but more about Iraq. And we ended Iraq, sort of. But we're not occupying Iraq. We're not occupying anybody right now. Whew, it's bad. It's this is nasty business. This is nasty business. Let me just tell you the history of Arlington National Cemetery just a little bit. This was established by George Washington's adopted grandson was the Arlington estate, George Washington Park Custis, to be a living memorial to the first president. Custis's daughter Mary married U.S. Army First Lieutenant Robert E. Lee in 1831. Robert E. Lee, of course, was the general who, well, he was pro-slavery kind of guy. You know, he was a guy who fought on the wrong side in the Civil War, but because of where it is, it's on this hill, and if you put rifles on this hill, you could basically shoot whoever you want in Washington D.C. So they took it. They took it during the Civil War in 1863. Some slaves lived there. Some runaway slaves lived there for a while in a little runaway slave village. And then after the war, in like 1864, 1865, they turned it into a cemetery. It had to grow. It had to grow a lot because well, a lot of our people die overseas. But there's a few famous people there too. One of those famous people is Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy is there because Robert Kennedy was assassinated while running a campaign. He was also, attorney general. He served his country. I'm pretty sure he was in the service. His brother was in the service. John F. Kennedy was in the service. I'm pretty sure Robert F. Kennedy was in the service too. RFK Jr. Just through his support behind Donald Trump. Any second thoughts, RFK Jr.? Any second thoughts? Does anyone else think that maybe maybe RFK Jr. you want to withdraw your support of Donald J. Trump now that he went to your dad's cemetery in order to desecrate the graves? Like these are what drives me crazy too is this disregard for the working man. These people who work there at the cemetery, they're just dudes and they have to deal. Can you imagine the shit they have to deal with? I read a story because of this that when they had to deal with people who want to like pour out a beer on their friend's gravestone and drink a shot because their buddy died in the war. And they have to deal with that. And they have to be like, look, you can't do that. You can't pour a beer on the grave and drink a shot at Arlington. This is like a church, okay? This isn't just a regular old cemetery. This is Arlington National Cemetery. There are people around who, we try to keep it up. It's not allowed. Imagine having to tell a person who gave up his best friend, whose friend died in the military. Maybe he watched his friend die, and all he wants to do is pour a beer on the grave and do a shot. And the people who work there just tell him no. These are people who deal with delicate situations. These aren't some yahoos screaming at the Trump administration, trying to get them to, being disgraceful. The only ones who are disgraceful in this are the people who brought cameras and the circus to hallowed ground. You don't bring the circus to church. It shouldn't be too hard to understand that. Utah Republican Governor Spencer Cox faced criticism Wednesday for including a photo of him and Trump at Arlington Cemetery in a campaign email soliciting donations for his reelection bid. They also released these photographs, and the people who were in the photographs, I'm sorry, not people, but gravestones who were in the photos, they looked up who those people were, and the families, they're like, we did not allow this. We did not allow my son, my husband's dead body, their name to be used in this campaign. One of them was suicide. He killed himself, and he's in Arlington. and the family's not okay with this being in the public. And now it is because of Donald Trump. This was not a campaign event, was never intended to be used by the campaign, said the governor in a post on X. It did not go through the proper channels and should not have been sent. More Republicans. Utah Republican Governor Spencer taking pictures with graves with Donald Trump, using the graves of our soldiers as props. Look at this. Look at him. Staged. Like, don't they realize that this type of stuff, we see that it's just him faking it? Don't they see? Don't they know? Like, it would have been better if without the photograph. But he commanded that photographs be taken so that he can make fun of them. It's horrific. I hope they press charges. He broke federal law. I hope they press charges on him. It's disgusting. Oh, Bartleby. Oh, humanity.